I would like to introduce everyone to Mo. He is with the LeTip of Lehigh Valley chapter out in Pennsylvania. He opened his business because he wanted to help businesses have a greater impact on their communities and help the people within those businesses improve their own quality of life. Mo has over 17 years of facilitated individual growth to spur organizational growth. Owners, executive leaders, and salespeople all benefit from Mo's practical approach to driving behavioral changes that get results for your organization. So today's topic, we're going to hand it off to you today, Mo, issues with retention, motivation, communication, and stress management. All yours, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Summer. Thank you for the lovely introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, first of all, thank you all for joining and giving me this hour to share my thoughts with you. I will be sharing my screen in a second with a PowerPoint that we will go through. But before I do so, while we see each other, I did want to let you all know, while I am presenting, please feel free to interrupt me at any time, to ask any questions, share your comments. And I'm really happy to see that there's some other coaches that joined us today. So collectively, our thoughts together, our ideas, we share as much as we can to benefit everyone else in the audience. That'll be great. I welcome everyone's opinions, everyone's comments, agreements, disagreements. The whole idea behind what I will be talking about today, mainly one thing which is I do with my clients, and I wanted to share it with you. I'm going to be sharing some points that I have noticed through my humble experience that they're kind of like blind spots or things that we don't usually tend to think about. So my idea or my intention is to share those amongst all of us together so that we can kind of think about them together and think about them after we are done. Okay, so with that said, let me go ahead real quick. I will share my screen and then we will get started. So what I have called my presentation is tackling the intangible, meaning we're going to be talking about things that are non-materialistic, that we go through and sometimes we notice and sometimes we do not. So to give you a quick idea, first, I'll give a quick glimpse as far as what my background is. I'll give us a starting point to simulate our minds by sharing a couple of scenarios, quick glimpses of things for us to start thinking together. Then I'll talk about different ways we can become effective leaders. I'll talk about comfort zones and what I mean by that. I'll talk about bad days at work, what I mean by that and how we can deal with them. I will talk about work and business world affection in a non-romantic idea, mentality, but more as it relates to the business world. I will talk about motivation, DISC, which is behavioral analysis, as some of us coaches may know, and then something that I call the READ process. So, my background, I worked in corporate, in pharma, and healthcare industry for about 15 years in sales and marketing operations and training. Then I switched over to consulting. I did some international consulting where I worked with some companies through mergers, through strategic alliances, working with some military in different governments overseas in the Gulf area and in Europe by forming synergies. Most of it in that sense was agricultural related. I got my undergrad in bio, an MBA in global management, MS in information management, and a doctorate in strategic studies. I started, like Summer said, about 15, 17 years ago, my coaching/consulting business, where I help small, medium, large companies in anything related to coaching and running their businesses, as we will see as we go along. I also have a consulting company I'm more engaged and more involved in the actual day-to-day operations of companies, building customer masters, ERPs, MRPs, and so on. And I also started a company about 10 years ago, dry cleaning company, which my wife and my family run now. But I mention it to show that I do go every day, and I did go through the pains of starting businesses, small businesses, and watching them grow. I have a couple of publications, books and booklets that I have published related to businesses, emotional intelligence, servant leadership, uh, sales mastering, motivation. And the one thing that I do encourage you to listen to, the main thing on this page is the podcast. I teach at a couple of universities, as listed in the previous slide. I forgot to mention at Montclair and Moravian. And with a couple of my colleagues, we run this podcast where we talk about topics related to businesses, things that we go through every day: motivation, delegation, team building, retention, and so on. We try to do it maybe twice a month, but that is out there. Anyone's more than welcome to listen to it. Okay, now let's dive into the material. I want you all to look at this slide and tell me, because this will give an idea what I want to talk about. Tell me what sticks out. And some of you may have seen it before. I see Hank nodding. What sticks out on this slide? And I want you to think about your sales team and how you approach your client slash customer. Go ahead, Hank.
You know, we use these exact stats all the time, and it's amazing. Sharon and I each have a different line that we think is amazing. I think it's only 10% of people make more than 3 contacts. And Sharon reminds all of our clients that it takes between 5 and 12 contacts to even get their attention. I mean,
That's
this is why
exactly it.
you'll be driving down the road listening, and you hear an ad on their radio, and it's like, oh my God, I just now realized what that ad was for. So you're so on with this.
And that's it. Thank you, Hank, for sharing this. And here it is. Let me zoom in for the sake of time. Look at line number 4. Only 10% of salespeople make more than 3 contacts. Then go all the way down to the very bottom. 80% of people make a decision to commit to something after 12 contacts. Now, keep this in mind for a second, okay? And let's go to the next slide. I'll come back to this. Hold this thought. In addition to making those contacts, here is what goes through someone's mind in this. And by the way, this is not my slide. I got this out of a Wharton study that was done at the Wharton Business School. This is for a service environment, and this is for a product environment. What goes through our mind when we're making a decision? We realize that we have a need for something. We look for a solution. We find someone to help us. We place the order, money, paying, receiving, on and on and on. But here's my point. What I want you guys all to think about while we're going through this, envision a scenario where you're trying to convince someone to do something without talking about your product or service at all. Meaning, do this, which is what I tell my clients. Stop thinking, loving, caring about your product and service, and think about the individual that you're dealing with, right? All of us, no matter what business we're in, we heard it a million times. We're in the business of marketing where we happen to sell a product or service. In addition to that, there is not one business that exists today that does not have competition. So there is someone out there that does exactly what you do. So back to what Hank said, and back to what I was talking about earlier in the previous slide. Point is, we need to make more than 1 contact. What are we going to say? So I have a client that is a golden prospect for me. Am I going to call him 12 times and be like, hey, do you want to work with me? I'm open 7 days a week. I'm open every day in the year. I'm the cheapest. I'm the best. Here's my cell phone. What am I going to say over those 12 times? Right? This is kind of what we're talking about today, guys. How do I tackle and approach my client in different ways based upon where their mind is? I always tell my clients that I coach, don't go out trying to sell and showing that your product is the best If someone doesn't even know that they need your product, right? What if somebody is at this point in their mind, awareness of a need? They don't even know that they need you, right? So the point is, when we're making those 12 points of contact, 11 points of contact, where is that person's mind? Am I talking to somebody that doesn't even know that they need me? Am I talking to somebody that's going through a selection process, or somebody that's zoomed in on working with me? All of that, right, is part of the mindset that we condition ourselves with when we're approaching a client, existing or new. Okay, now I wanted to kind of set this stage up to kind of give you an idea how we're going to think about the following slides that I'm going to share, right? That nothing that we're talking about has to do with a product or a service. It has to do with the people that offer or receive the product and service. So let's start from a very high level. And again, please interrupt me anytime if you have any questions or comments. Finding a way to be an effective leader. And I worded this on purpose, the way I put it, versus saying being or becoming an effective leader, because I think they're two different things, right? There are different venues, options available to us to utilize to become effective as a leader. And we can spend a day talking about it. But the reason I started with a SWOT, because that is what I usually do with most of my companies. We can do a Porter analysis, we can do a Pastel, we can do many, many different types of analysis with a company depending on the size. But I notice most companies we do a SWOT. And as we all know, the strength and the weakness looks at the internal aspect of the business, opportunity and threat looks at the outside. So now I know what my strengths and weaknesses are. What am I going to do with them? Right? Generally speaking, a lot of clients that I work with tell me, these are my weaknesses, I want to make them better. Nope. What I want you guys to start thinking about with your team, or what I would humbly like to share, is that when we have something that we're good at, or our team is good at, we zoom in on it, harness it, and make it bigger. We take the strengths and we make them more effective, and we utilize the heck out of them. Weaknesses we shrink and make disappear. Yes, there are some cases where we can take weaknesses and improve them. But to give an idea, an example, kind of what I'm going to share later, we cannot take all introverts and make them great public speakers. Do you guys get it? So there's some weaknesses that we need to totally eliminate and put aside and focus on what we're good at. Now, be very, very, very careful setting the standards of your team. Meaning, what you get your team used to doing is what they're going to do for the rest of their career. If you tolerate weaknesses, failures, if you're too lenient, that's going to be the bar that everyone's going to fall down to and follow. Do you guys get it? So challenge the status quo. And this is why I say different ways to be a strong, effective leader. I work with clients, right, based upon their personality. They're a little too forgiving. So if they have 4 sales reps, 3 of them are super duper effective, 1 of them is average, and they notice that me as the business owner, I am patient and tolerating the average person, they're going to drop down to that level because they know they're going to be okay. Do you guys get it? So always be careful what standards you set within your team, even if it's 3 people or 2 people, right? That's part of the mindset. Habits and cultures. Let me lay this out very quickly. What we think in our mind, hence the mindset, triggers an emotion. The emotion that we feel triggers an action. The action that we do over and over and over becomes a habit. The habit that we have defines the culture of our business. Do you guys get the sequence of events? That's why it really all starts with the idea, the misunderstanding that could happen in the mind, good or bad, right? That's why I focused on a couple of slides on having a good or a bad day. Let me just look real quick in the chat, see if anybody wrote anything I need to talk about. Oh, I'm sorry, Marianne, I missed your question. Yes, SWOT is strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Thank you, Christine, for answering the question for me. As you guys see, I'm a lecturer in school, so I'm used to babble a lot and talk and talk and talk. So I'm telling you, interrupt me and tell me to stop if you have a question. It's just by habit, I tend to get carried away when I talk. But anyway, so this is why I always tell people, begin with the mindset, because what goes on in the mind is what sets the company's culture. Now, another thing that I wanted to bring up, which is actually not my terminology, it's called the torture genius. It was in a book that I read called Extreme Ownership by a Navy SEAL that started a consulting company. Really good book. I encourage everyone to read it. There were two of them, Willink and Babin. But anyway, they talk about the torture genius. Somebody that in her or his mind, they think that anything that happens to them or to their team, right, is someone else's fault. And this is also what feeds into the culture of the company and setting the standard. Be wary of people in your team that blame others for mistakes. Yes, there's cases where things happen because of someone else, but we need to practice as a leader having a team that takes accountability and ownership for what happens, good or bad. Any questions, thoughts, comments while I continue? Okay. Now, here is something that I also always use as a starting point with my clients. People find a comfort zone. Something happens that they're not comfortable with, that scares them. They crawl back into their comfort, their safe haven, right? What I tell my clients to always do is start challenging yourself, start getting comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Break out of that routine, that safe spot that you have. Or let me just see if somebody wrote something. Oh, really? Interesting, Hank. Yeah, I use it all the time too, right? Thank you. Try to avoid that routine in your mind where when something happens that you're uncomfortable with, you go back to the environment where you are comfortable. Because especially if you're in a company where you have a team, when they see this happening, they follow the same path. And in that case, they do not challenge themselves or change habits that are not good for them, right? So this is why I say a dominant fear, and I'll explain what I mean by dominant fears in a second. They push us into our comfort zone. But then what happens, right? Do I lose communication? Do I lose motivation? Do I lose contact with my team, with my clients? What is it that happens when a dominant fear is triggered? What is it that I try to avoid? So if we look, oh, where did I go? Right here. What do I mean by a bad day, right? And I'm going to kind of come back to this point when I use examples when we look at the disc later on. But based upon the type of person that we are, we react to things in a good way and we react to things in a bad way differently. We are all, as humans, predictably different. That's the part. We are predictably different. Understanding that we are different is half the battle. Now, I can tell you from a lot of research that I read in the past 4,000 years, from aristocracies to scientists, scholars from the 60s, from the 80s, from the 90s, from 2000 BC. For some reason, people have always been broken up into four categories. I don't know why, but most 90% of the studies, people have been categorized in four groups. And I'm going to use the disc as our example today, but there's others. Some coaches use Myers-Briggs. Some people use other means to analyze people. I use this one because I'm used to it, and I think it's very effective out of all the ones that I've used. But here's the thing. based upon what type of person I am, a dominant fear to me may be being rejected. A dominant fear to me may be that somebody doesn't care for me or love me. A dominant fear might be that I'm not challenged enough, that I don't feel safe. Regardless of what that dominant fear is, right? It triggers a bad day that we react to differently. Once that happens, think again about the habit, the thought, the emotion, the culture of the business. Once that happens, it will not only impact you, but your reaction will impact everyone around you. Don't just think about yourself, but think about your team as well. So what I like that motivates me and what I do not like, which creates my dominant fear or my anger, is strongly correlated and linked to what type of person I am, right? Which means what? It means the more you know yourself and the more you know your team, the better you will be able to deal with what? The intangible that I talk about. Put aside the product and service, right? We all love what we offer. We're all proud of being coaches. We're all proud of the product that we sell. We're all proud of the service. Reality, the customer doesn't care. The customer cares about your intention and how you're approaching them, right? And how you're going to deal with them, which I'll come back to later. So now, the more the dominant fear that we face, the more you're going or we are going to deal with things that we don't like. The more somebody challenges me or pushes me into a corner where I'm not comfortable and I'm dealing with something that I hate, the more I'm going to react in ways that I don't like, right? And I'll show you this in an example with one of my clients later. Going back to what I said earlier, that Christine explained with the strengths and weaknesses, the more you know what your limitations and weaknesses are, and you know what you're good at and what you suck at and what you're horrible at, the better you will be able to deal with yourself, what is coming at you, and with your team. We all have weaknesses. Shrink them, and the strengths, grow them. If you have the luxury, try to switch some of the weaknesses into strengths. I do not encourage it most of the time. I encourage focusing on what you're good at. Nourish that and let that grow. What, based upon our personality type, and observe this with your team and observe it with yourself, right? How do people react when they're intimidated, when they're upset, when they're challenged in a way that they don't like? Some people lash out. They become very rebellious and very demanding with themselves and others. Some people hide, crawl back into their comfort zone, and they wait for everything to go away. They're hoping it's going to go away by itself. Some people avoid the whole confrontation and they slow down. Their motivation is gone. They become very demotivated and everything, the wheel of production just stops. Some people become so obsessed with defending themselves that they gather data. They look up emails from 2 years ago, from a week ago, to explain that they were right and the other person is wrong, right? So it goes back to the point, if you understand yourself and understand your team, you will preventively be able to avoid this situation, this type of environment. Do you guys get it? So it really has nothing to do with the issue that's being discussed. It has everything to do with who you're discussing it with. There's many cases where I am right and I know I am right in a discussion, but I lose the advantage and I lose my point because I don't know how to deal with the person that I'm talking with, right? Most people listen so that they wait for you to shut up so that they can say what's on their mind. They don't even pay attention to half of what you're saying. So that's the world that we have to deal with, right? How do we interact with these types of people? Okay. Let me explain what I mean by affection here. As we will see in a couple of slides, there are some people that are task-oriented and some people that focus on people. Think of it this way. You show up to work. you're 5 seconds late, you swipe your time card, your boss sees that you were 5 seconds late, they love you, but they dock your pay because the task that you're supposed to do, showing up on time, you did not do, task oriented. Another manager, you show up an hour late to work every day, but they love you. You love them. You go out to lunch every day. You guys are very close. They let it slide because they are more focused on the people aspect of the relationship. So there's some people that care about what you do to them, liking them, hating them, complimenting them, pleasing them, and so on. And some people care about what you do for them, the task, right? So what we have to pay attention to is understanding if the person that we're dealing with is somebody that is more people oriented, that cares about that one-to-one relationship, or do they somebody that could care less about who I am and where I'm from and what sports team I like, but they only care about what it is that I'm going to offer them, right? That's what I mean by affection, the buy-in. How do I convince somebody?
Hey, Mo,
Yes,
it's Steve. Sorry to interrupt you on this, but you just triggered something for me when you said about the people and to
yes.
get to know the person. Now, some of you may be sports fan or not sports fan, I don't know, but I just heard that Tom Coughlin from the Giants, the reason why they actually won the Super Bowl the first year was because he became a people person. He was all
Wow.
about the task. He was all about this. And then he said, you know what? I'm going to make a switch. I'm going to get to know my players. I'm going to talk to them and see how they're doing, see how their family is. And boom, it was a switch and they won the Super Bowl. So that was like, that's like just now when you said that, it triggered something for me. So thanks. That's like
No,
perfect.
thank you. Thank you. That's a perfect example. That's a perfect example to bring up now, Steve. Thank you, because that's exactly it. Once you focus on the people, you win. Once you get, that's the leader, right? Forget the product, forget, that's the manager's job, right? The manager will run behind the leader and get things done. The leader is the one that creates that environment, kind of like exactly what Steve said, right? You get that buy-in, you get that passion when you work with the person, not the product or service. Okay? In general, in general, it's easier for someone that is aggressive and energetic to slow down and pause and hit reset to think about things. And sometimes it's more difficult to get somebody to be who they're not by making them more aggressive, more exposed, more extroverted, and so on. It's just one point I wanted to throw out there because we're talking about people and we're talking about connecting with people. Not everybody can do it. And this is why we say not everyone can be a leader. This is exactly why. Not everybody knows how to do what Steve just said, right? Not everybody knows how to connect at a people-to-people level. But the idea, the magic of the intangible, even in LeTip, do you guys know in the last year, I joined LeTip last year. And you can ask this in anyone in the Lehigh Valley in the Emmaus chapter to confirm what I said. I've had about 14 visitors come, right? About 14 or 15 visitors come with me to attend LeTip. And it was all because I did not talk about the details of what we do at LeTip, but I talked about how they're going to benefit from it. And I related to them as an individual to have them come. One of them joined, two of them were going to join, but they ended up, they couldn't because one of them couldn't commit the 4 times a week. And the other one, there was somebody already that was very close to them as far as their business, right? So 3 wanted to join. The point is this, when I did that, I did it by connecting on that one-to-one level, right? Understanding what motivates them, what they like to talk about, and connecting with them at that level. Now, let's talk about motivation. And I'm going to start with these 2 points. If there is one takeaway for you guys to get out of this presentation, it's these 2 sentences I'm going to share now. If we look at me and Hank, the more, if Hank knows himself better than anyone, if I know as much about Hank as he knows about himself, I'm going to communicate really well with him. Okay? Because I know what he likes to talk about, what he doesn't like to talk about, what irks him, what makes him happy, and so on. The second part, if I know more about Hank than he knows about himself, I will be able to motivate him. So the takeaway is this: when you're talking to somebody, the more you understand them and the more you know them, the better you will be able to communicate with them. And if you cross that threshold where you start knowing more about themselves than they know, you will be able to motivate them. And why does this matter? Because we can never, ever, ever, ever motivate somebody to do something that we want. We can motivate people only to do something that they want. Again, when you have a team at work, when you have one person, you will not be able to motivate them to do what you want. You will be able to motivate them to do what they want. Meaning you have to convince them that what you want is what they should want as well. That's the secret of motivation, of being an effective leader. Let me see if somebody wrote something in the chat. Oh, okay. Do you guys get it? So this is why I say, back to what I said before about culture and about the environment, the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions unconsciously shape what we decide to do. John, go ahead, sir.
So, I mean, you're hitting on everything that is so important, especially for you as a business coach. Like I have a client of mine, they started in LeTip. I met them in LeTip. We've been going on about 5 years. They have not had a single turnover in the last 5 years. Okay.
Wow.
They're 11 employees. And one of the things that we've done is exactly what you're talking about. We introduced DISC, we introduced driving forces, we introduced competencies and emotional quotient, all those assessments. And so we've hired based on the right fit, and we meet with them, or the client meets with them on a regular basis. But one of the things to give you kudos on is they look at their assessment. There's a section in the assessment, I'm sure you're aware of it, how to communicate, how not to communicate, right? What their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, right? And
Yeah.
so what they have found is every time they meet with their employee, and we don't no longer call it a review, it's a coaching session, right? With the employees, right? They like that. And what happens is they communicate with them at a high level, and I was like, why have you not? They have 92% utilization. Okay, where for those of you that don't know, out of 40 hours a week, 92% of that work is productive.
Wow.
I literally went up and I talked to the employees, and here's something for you. Is like I said, why? What is it about Jackson and Sands Engineering? You can look him up. He's in the LeTip Wire, Sean Jackson. What is it about Jackson Sands Engineering that makes you why are you here? What they go, Sean and Frank listen to us. I feel like they now we're talking engineers here. We're not talking salespeople.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Civil engineers, like propeller heads. Okay. High C personalities. And they're like, I just really feel Sean and Frank totally understand me. They understand exactly what I need. I seem like they listen, and I'm like, it's a learned skill, man. They utilize this science that you're talking about, and it's super powerful. So thanks a lot for sharing, man. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thank you for sharing what you just said, John, because that is the part I missed to mention. Listening is the secret, the trick. Listening. Stop talking and listen. Just like exactly what John said. That's exactly it. And what Hank shared on this in the chat, and thank you again, John, before I move on. What Hank shared is exactly 100% true. When I talk with CEOs, I always tell them it's better to hire a manager and teach them the profession than hire somebody that is familiar with your profession that's not a good manager, right? The focus is always on that management trait, that leadership trait, because that stuff is very, very, very difficult to grow and learn. Do you guys get it? Thank you, everybody, for sharing your valuable input. I really appreciate it. Let me just see if somebody, okay, no. We're good. Okay. Now, what else do I need to say about motivation? Thoughts, feelings, emotions, unconsciously. I think that's it. Okay. So you guys get the idea, right? Motivation is not always about money. You could have somebody that's a millionaire that works in your company that could care less about how much you pay her or him. They have other motivators in their life. So it goes back again to what John just said, knowing who you are in the disc and knowing who your team is, what type of person they are, which brings me to the next few slides talking about disc a little bit. When I say people like to buy from people they like, I don't mean necessarily buying as if you're at the Home Depot. I mean, you're buying into an idea. You're following a leader, right? You're getting buy-in from someone. That's what I'm talking about. Some people like their leader or manager to be direct. They like them to have fun. They like them to show them what's the latest technology that's out there. They like to just see data, just give them a document with all the data. They want that personal touch, the gift, the nice gesture, and so on, right? There's different types of people, and not everybody works with all of these. So this is why it goes back again. Once you understand who you're working with and what type of person they are, it matters. It really does matter because you know the right approach. The four types of people that we have, and some of you will be familiar with this, so that's why I'm just going over it for the sake of time quickly. We have the dominant type, the D style. We have the influencer, the impulsive I style. We have the S style, somebody that is steady, that doesn't like change, that resists change, that's sometimes stubborn. And then we have the C style that John was talking about, people that are like the engineers, right? Data, 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 details, details. The people to people part is secondary. Do you guys get it? So these are the four main types of people. What you'll notice, what matters the most is if you look on the right, it says people. And if you look on the left, it says task. If you look at the top, it says active, at the bottom, passive, meaning the combination of these four types, because none of us are just one, the combination of them tells you if you're dealing with somebody that is people-oriented and active, task-oriented and active, task-oriented but passive, and so on. So it gives you an idea about what dominant fears they have, what motivates them, how to approach them, and so on, right? It's all about those intangible attributes that we tend not to think about. When I'm going to make those 12 calls to reach out to somebody to convince them to buy my product based upon who they are here, I'm going to use that, right? I'll give you an example, and some of you coaches will know this. I go to meet with a client to tell them what we want to do. The first thing they say, yeah, let's go out and meet over lunch. Right? The I style. They just want to sit and talk. I ask them, how's your dog? How was your day? It takes them 3 hours to answer. I love it and they love it because they just want that connection. Do you guys get it? So those are the type of people that we need to understand. Based upon that, you get an idea about what motivates each person. The D and the C, motivated by data. The I and the S, they're motivated by experience and by interaction and discussion. The D and the I, they're more optimistic, more idealistic. The C and the S tend to be a little more realistic and sometimes pessimistic. Not all the time, but sometimes, right? So again, this just gives you a flavor of how people think. I'm going over them quickly. We can spend a week talking about these, but I just want to give you an idea what, again, you need to think about. What I work with my clients on, right? I first start with having them understand themselves. And then as we meet, I get them to the point where they literally like the Matrix. When they're talking to somebody in their mind, they're thinking D-I-S-C, what type of person this is. And I get them used to understanding that person within the first 5-10 minutes so that they can understand how to deal and interact with that person. Do you guys get it? Because that's what really matters out of all of this. That without them knowing them, your client or your audience, your team, before they're even a mile away, you know who they are and how to deal with them. And these are the questions that we ask here, right? Each type of person is given a different type of question. Each type of person will dictate and necessitate a different type of approach. Here's an example. One of my clients. What you see in this is part of a DISC report, right? The first graph that we see, let's start from the left. The public self, the mask, is how people see you. The middle graph is how you act when you're stressed, when you're angry, when you're cornered. And the perceived self is how you see yourself. Let me give an example about this person, just real quick for the sake of time. This person, based upon what we see in these graphs, is very passive. Very passive. The fact that the D is very low means that they don't make decisions. The fact that the I is low, right? They're not very verbal, they don't talk, and they tend to slow down very much because the S and the C are very high. This was a manager that reported to a business owner that I was working with, a client, and it reflected that that manager, which was in sales, believe it or not, was too passive. They were given things to do. It would take them forever to finish it. And they would always delay because they did not make decisions. Part of it, believe it or not, ended up being linked to something similar to this guy. Look at this graph in the public self. This graph indicates that somebody's trying to be everything at once. And it was for the exact same reason. The manager gave no direction. So the business owner gave no direction, clear direction. So the manager was trying to be everything at once. And this was a great concern. I sat with the business owner. I told him part of our task was to get that business owner to have clear goals and objectives for his managers. They didn't know which way to go. Do you guys get it? So what we get out of these graphs when we know ourselves and we know our team is to understand where they are with themselves, where they are with the client, where they are when they have a bad day, which is the middle graph, and so on, right? Once we know that, here's what happens. We try to modify our behavior, change it if possible. We try to capitalize, like I said, on what we're good at and minimize what we're bad at. We augment, we substitute one thing for the other. If I'm a high D and I can never change and I'm not good at discussing or talking, what do? I get that client and I hire him as an assistant that is a high I, so that he can go out with that manager, with that business owner, and do the conversational part, right? We augment, or we blend different styles together. But this is what the takeaway is behind everything that we talked about. Now, let me end up. This is something that it's a program I go through with my clients to show them how to relate to their customers without talking about the product. We relate to our client. We establish a need. This is what I call the read process, right? Starting with the relate. We relate. We spend time connecting and understanding our client or our team. We establish a need for something. We advance a tailored solution, not just any solution, something that is specific to what they need. And then we develop commitment. So guess what? Your product and service comes here at the very end, very, very end. I'll give you a little secret. The longer you wait to share what you do and how much it is, the higher the chance it will be that you will get buy-in. Somebody will work with you. Don't start a fraud. I have a financial investor. The second she sits with somebody, she holds up her package. This is what we offer. This is what we offer. This is what we do. We're the best. We've been around for 125 years. Blah, 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 blah. There's no connection. She doesn't know who she's talking to. Do you guys get it? So this is what I want to end with. We are responsible for what happens. We need to always challenge the status quo. Change, improve, self-evaluate. Be slow to judge and be quick to look at yourself. Slow to judge others and quick to reprove and evaluate your own faults. Change what you think and what you feel so that you can change the behavior. Back to what I said before. Always go back to your mindset. Break out of the routine that you follow every day if you do want to make a change. We can't keep repeating the same thing that we do over and over and over. We've heard it a million times. Challenge some of the assumptions that you like, some of the assumptions that you believe to be true, right? If I change my personality, if I connect with my team, the rest of the good will follow. Try new things. Take calculated risks. There's a million coaches out there. You don't have to work with me. You don't have to work with anyone else. Find somebody that you're comfortable with, open up, brainstorm with them. I do the same thing. I had a coach for myself 10 years ago that helped me better manage my time and prioritize. We all need work, right? Go past that step and start doing that self-discovery. Thank you, everybody, for your time.